And I know what the Seahawks bring to the table offensively, and I'll leave that to Max. But I think that the Rams have something to prove here. I mean, for Tua Tagovailoa to be in his first start, for him basically to play the role of spectator, and still the Rams end up beating you because Jared Goff stunk up the joint with 4 turnovers in the first half in their last game, which was a loss at Miami. I think that the Rams are going to be hungry. Jalen Ramsey will be back in the lineup. We don't know how significant he'll be, but nevertheless, I don't think that the Rams at 5-3, as bad as they've looked at certain moments throughout this season, I think they always play the Seahawks tough. I think this is going to be one of those games. Obviously, Aaron Donald and Brock and those boys getting at Russell Wilson will be key. I think Jalen Ramsey's coming back this week for a reason, because you got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to deal with. I think that the Rams will be ready. I think they'll show up, and I think that their defense, more importantly, will show up because of the way, the team wet the bed in their last loss. I just have this funny feeling. Usually when it comes to the Rams and Seahawks, Max, they always play one another tough, and whatever our expectations are, somehow, some way, it always ends up being a tad bit differently. It will be competitive, but I think that the Rams defense in this particular instance is going to be more reliable than the Seahawks offense, in my personal estimation.
It's a great rivalry. The NFC West is stacked with them and stacked with excellent teams. And here's another example. And you're right. Especially I noticed, like, if the Rams are flying high and the Seahawks are having an off year, like, you don't want to see Seattle, because that turns into like a big game for them, and vice versa, right? They'll be the thorn in each other's side. And here they both have legitimate title hopes. If the Seahawks can get the defense together, and the Rams have to, play their best in order for that to happen. But I like the Seahawks offense here. First of all, they just lost. And I think Russell Wilson, as we're talking about Tom Brady and how he bounces back from losses, give me Russell Wilson in a game like this after his team was just embarrassed. The Rams have a really good defense, as we know. You mentioned Aaron Donald. Cowboys' first week scored 17 points. Cowboys have a good offense. It's week 1. Otherwise, they played the Eagles, the Giants, Washington, the Niners, the Bears. Stop me when you hear a team with a fearsome offense, right? They have 2 losses this year. One, 28 points that the Dolphins hung on them, right? And the other was a 35 points that the Bills hung on them, meaning they've looked tremendous against subpar offenses, with the exception of week 1 against Dallas. And again, this is a COVID year. Teams couldn't practice, all that stuff. Before they start playing football, you get funky kind of outcomes. It's not that the Rams don't have talent there, Stephen A. They do. But when they've faced real offenses, those offenses have been able to hang points on them. I expect the same thing here, especially since, people forget, because Metcalf and Lockett are so good, you're thinking about those kind of big plays. Russell Wilson can still link up with his tight ends, even before you talk about the run game. There's all kinds of options he has on offense as one of the great quarterbacks of all time in his prime, having an MVP caliber season, knowing I just talked about the stopper that Tom Brady has to be, knowing that he has to be the stopper. He's the one, after a loss, he's the one quarterback in football, there's only one, where the team goes to him every single week and says, win a shootout. You got to win a shootout again this week, and most times he does. I expect him to do it against a formidable defense again this weekend.
Let me tell you something right now, Max. First of all, let's be careful about what we're talking about when we say the Miami Dolphins dropped 28 on the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams gave up 55 yards rushing, 93 yards passing. They lost that game because their offense gave the ball to Miami and didn't require them to do anything. Miami's offense did virtually nothing in that game. Their defense obviously forced turnovers on the part of Jared Goff, so we've got to pay attention to that. That's number one. Number 2, the Los Angeles Rams do not have a good defense. They have an elite defense. They are number 2 overall in points allowed, in yards allowed, in passing yards allowed, and they're number 5 against the rush. That is elite in the National Football League. That is what they are. That is who they are. Aaron Donald's got 9 sacks. Leonard Floyd's got about 4. Brock has got at least 2. I mean, they can get to the passer. And, oh, by the way, Russell Wilson has been sacked 24 times this year. So the way I look at it, I'm looking at this defense and I'm saying against Seattle, why should I not rely on the Los Angeles Rams defense in this particular situation, particularly with Jalen Ramsey coming back. Now, Seattle's got the number one offense, and they've got the number one passing attack, no question. But you don't have Carson running the football. Last time I checked, unless he's coming back, and I missed that report. The bottom line is their running game is suspect. So as a result of it, it's going to be even more on Russell Wilson with Metcalf and with Tyler Lockett. And that means you have much more opportunities if you're Aaron Donald and the crew to get to Russell Wilson. I think this is going to be close, but I think that the Rams defense should be more trusted in this particular situation than Seattle's offense.
I mean, but Seattle's offense hangs big numbers on people week in and week out. And I'll say this about the Rams defense. Aaron Donald, to me, when I think of the greatest defenders I've ever seen, he's one of them. He might be like, if you're talking about defensive tackles, he's probably my number one of all time that I've seen, right? I think of the greatest defenders, LT and Deion Sanders and Reggie White and Bruce Smith and J.J. Watt recently. Aaron Donald, I think of him with those guys, and not at the end of the pack either. He's squarely in the middle of that pack, right? So I'm not doubting his talent or the Rams' ability, but I will point something out. When you talk about like how they are against the run and how they rate so highly across the board. The Cowboys have no offensive line this year, right? Up front in particular, they can be devastating with Donald. The Giants not only have no offensive line, but they have no Saquon Barkley. The Bears have one of the worst offensive lines I can remember. They can't block for the run. They can't protect the pass, right? And I know every team plays teams like that by middle point in the season, right? You've had some soft opponents. But in particular, for a team with Aaron Donald up front, when you're facing those kind of teams, I think the kind of sense of your defense might be a little bit overblown. And even though Seattle is not like they have the most fearsome offensive line, they have a quarterback who frequently doesn't need it.
But remember what I told you. Remember what I've said, and I've said this on many, many occasions. Throw all of that out the window when it comes to divisional rivals. Because when you're divisional rivals, you're incredibly familiar with one another. You're more hyped for those games. There's an elevated level of urgency that gets attached to those games. And as a result, you usually see competitive matchups. I don't see a shootout between the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, if you want to call 34-31, for example, like like Miami recently had with Arizona or something like that, yeah. But I don't see Seattle dropping 40 plus on the Rams or anything like that. I think this is going to be a hard-fought game. I view it as something along the lines of 30-27. I'm just saying that I'm going to rely on LA's defense when it counts.